Okay, guys and gals, 5:05 on a Friday. Man, let me just start off saying one, thanks for everybody for showing up. Man, we got Greece, we got UK in the house, we got Australia. Today, mate. Man, it is so cool that there is a awesome global, worldwide community of oil geeks. That I'm not the only one. That literally there's 250,000 something of us, that is subscribed to the channel. And before we dig into all this stuff, and man, we got a lot of fun stuff for everybody tonight. It's going to be great. Going to bust some AI junk, and we're going to get the guys from Donaldson are coming on. So at 5:30 Eastern, so about 25 minutes from now, the guys from Donaldson are going to join us, and we're going to be able to do some live Q&A toward the end of their presentation. But they're bringing in some data. We're going to do a little bit of deeper dive on filters, so make sure you hang out for that. But before we get to there, we got a little bit of work to do with the AI deal. We're going to cover that in a second. But one, I just want to say, Canada, man, I just want to give a shout out to everyone that is watching, that is supporting this channel. And tonight, the way we basically are going to debunk this video is we're going to do it with data that you help create, right? I mean, that's what's awesome, right? Is not just that you guys are watching the videos. A whole bunch of you guys are also doing oil analysis, and we're building this database that gives us real information. So we don't have to guess. You don't have to speculate or theorize. We have real data. And it's not just one sample here, one sample there. That's all anecdotal, right? What we're going to be able to do is bring in big data and give you answers that should be very helpful, because it's not going to be from small data sets. It's from a giant data set that you have helped create. So I'm trying to talk to everybody and look at the camera and not look at the comments. But man, this is awesome. I am so excited. I'm so proud of everybody for being part of this and helping make this happen. It's super cool. Oh man, look at that. Rockingham, North Carolina, Bay Area, New Jersey, Canada. I mean, Virginia. Man, that's awesome, man. This is just so cool, right? Man, Midwest F1, dude. We're already going to go there right now. Man, don't be putting anything in any oils, right? I mean, I know Ceratec and Liptratec and all that kind of stuff, man, but I'm just not a fan of putting any additives in anything at any time for any reason, especially when you have products like that are designed to clean, right? I'll pop it up here so everybody can see what the question is, right? I mean, I wouldn't do it. And it might work for you, but man, I'm never going to recommend doing that by any means. I mean, from Russia, man, we got the whole world in the house. I mean, that's crazy. That's cool. Okay, all right, we can get distracted here. Let's get on to the main thing here. Main thing is this. There's a semi-viral video that's been kind of going around. And if you haven't seen this thumbnail yet, this is the thumbnail of this video. And the problem is, especially saying that there's a 50-engine study, they claim, that provides information about the wear characteristics between 0W20 and 5W20. I'm not sure how many people have actually seen this video or not. I mean, the other day it had over 200-something thousand views, which, hey, for a video about oil in a week, those are good numbers. But there's a couple of big problems with the video. One, if you watch it, is completely AI generated. It's just B-roll, images that have been stolen from other videos. I actually went to the channel website, and there's like a thumbnail that they ripped off the image from one of my videos, right? So they're just scrubbing YouTube, grabbing information or grabbing video to string together. and then it's a AI voice reading what's an AI generated transcript, right? So it's really bad. So let's deal with the first thing first, because the whole idea that there could be a 50 engine study that is run on both viscosity oils and we have this data, well, that's interesting, right? But here's the problem with that 50 engine study. It doesn't exist, right? So with a little bit of Google, right, so you can go read the transcript, and they basically quoted that this was a test done by an independent lab in association with the Automotive Testing Institute of North America. So I'm a member of SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers. I'm also a member of STLE, Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers. And I've been to ASTM, which is Society of Testing and Materials, and I've been to other professional organizations in the automotive industry. I had never heard ever of the Automotive Testing Institute of North America, and apparently Google hadn't either. So this is just completely made up. It's just straight fakery. It's just lies, right? It's like why I said in the title, this is straight up AI lies. This doesn't exist. There isn't a 50 engine test. And that's just the reality. Now, obviously what they're trying to do is they're trying to play on the fact that obviously we've talked about it before. GM had the recall with the 020 and people are scared. It's thin oils. I talked to, you viewers are our customers at Speed Diagnostics. And so that's really where we need to go, because we can dig in, all right? Let's really look at some used oil analysis results between 0W20 and 5W30, because obviously this video is just made up. So don't even listen to anything that it says. The idea that you could have a study where you had some wear comparisons, well, that would be good. So let's see. So what happened was, and I need to give a little bit of credit here. So quick pause. A really good friend of mine named Chip Hewitt. So Chip's going to end up being in some videos on the channel later, and you're probably going to see quite a bit with Chip in the future. So Chip was a formulator and statistician and did a lot of work for Afton Chemicals. So if you long-term follower of the channel, you've heard me mention there's only 4 companies in the planet that make the additives that go into every brand of oil and every brand of fuel: Lubrizol, Afton, Ornite, and Infinium. So Chip worked for one of those companies and is a super smart guy and has been involved in tons of testing and formulating. So Chip retired back in April. So back in August, Chip has actually started to kind of come work for me part-time, just to kind of help with some stats projects and some other cool stuff we're working on the Speed Diagnostics side. So Chip used the same software that he used at Afton that can do some really deep data analysis. We sent him the entire Speed Diagnostics database going back to 2018, right? So that's 7 years worth of oil analysis history, and had him begin to see, okay, what can we pull out of that data set and maybe answer this question with real science, as opposed to just internet speculation, fear mongering, and all the other junk that you see on most of the channels. So let's actually see what really happened. So a little bit of background. Like I said, Chip dug through it all, and we would look for engines that had been operating with a 20 grade and a 30 grade. So we had to see in their sample history that they had either been using a 20 grade and then went to a 30 grade. And that's what normally happens. You don't usually have someone running a 30 grade and then drop down to a 20 grade. What you're normally going to see is engines begin on a 020 or 520 and then go to a 030 or 530. So that's what you're looking at here, is we're running through all of the data. And Chip found 129 individual vehicles where we could demonstrate that change from 20 grade to 30 grade. Everybody following along here on that one? Because this is what we have. But we did break the data into two groups. So the first group is going to be the first data set you're going to see is all the vehicles, all 129 vehicles. Odometer excluded. We're not looking at the age of the odometer when the samples are taken. The next one is we're going to remove all the vehicles where the odometer reading was under 10,000 miles. And the reason for that, and you're going to see it yourself, is that under 10,000 miles, you're still getting break-in effects. So without giving away everything that's coming down the future, we're going to have a deep dive video coming out before the end of the year that really gets into the break-in effects. For all the flat earthers out there that think that engines aren't broken in or are broken in from the factory, we got news for you. That's not the case. And they don't even break in the first 500 miles, not even the first 1,000 miles. We're having to remove the first 10,000 miles to separate out the break-in effects from everything else. So let's go ahead and jump right into it so you can see that. So if we're looking at just under 10,000 miles, there's a giant difference here between the wear metals, all right? Here's all the different pairs, right? So all wear metals is that first column, then just copper and lead, so that's bearing material. Then copper, or iron, chromium, aluminum, that's just cylinder wear. And then you got a combination of iron, chromium, copper, and aluminum, kind of that aggregate bunch right there at the end. And what you see is obviously 020 much, much higher than 5W30. But remember, you have to put a giant asterisk on this data, because if you look at this, you say, well, slam dunk, right? 530 is definitely better than 020. But the problem is none of these engines really started with 530 and went to 020. They started with 020 and went to 530. What you're seeing here is the difference in wear metals between the first oil change and the second oil change. You're actually seeing the break-in effects. This is not real. I want you to let that sink in just for a second, because in light of this fake AI video, I want you to see that if I didn't tell you that that was 10,000 miles, I could easily make a case, fake as it is, that 5W30 is better than 0W20. You see the numbers right here on the screen, or you see the plot on the screen. But without the proper context, that data is meaningless. So you have to see that odometer makes a difference when we begin to look at wear metal analysis between vehicles. So I just don't want anyone to get faked out, right? There's so much marketing, and I'm not fussing at anybody, right? I am super happy everyone's here and participating. I mean, it's awesome. But I see people listing brand names. I hate oil marketing. And I'm not saying that those brands aren't good, and there aren't good oils, and there are some brands that make really great oils. But the reality is this: stop thinking about the brands. Brands don't matter. Most of them don't even design their own oil. It's Acmens, Lubrisols, Ornites, and Theniums of the world that do the hard work. They're just blending and packaging and marketing. I hate oil marketing. Don't fixate on that. And the thing is, why I'm showing this data is because I want you to not be fooled by the clever marketers who are making claims. Look a little deeper. Question what you're seeing. Because again, these data is statistically significant. But the reality is, it's telling a false narrative, because what you're seeing is the break-in effect going from the first oil change to the second oil change. The fact that you put 530 in there in the second oil change isn't the big driver. And I can say that with confidence, because if you look at the wear metals, right? 0, 20, 5, 30, or 0 or 20 to 30, right? You can see all wear metals are going from 65 parts per million per 1,000 miles to 20 parts per million, right? So we get this big movement, right? But if you look at all of them, every engine, not just 020s, not just 530s, look at all of the data. It's the same, right? 67 to 26, on the silicon, 37 to 17, right? So when you begin to look at engine wear as a function of odometer, of engine time, you can begin to see that you can't trust any oil analysis data on engines with less than 10,000 miles. It's going to lie to you. So just throw it out, pay no attention to it, right? So with that kind of established, right? Thank you. Let's look at this. If you take away all the samples under 10,000 miles and only look at the middle section of engines past break-in, now the differences aren't statistically significant, right? Say that 5 times fast, right? The differences are not statistically significant between a 20 grade and a 30 grade, between a 020 and a 5W30. And this is what I see all the time. In fact, if anything, the 30 grades are slightly higher in wear than the 20 grades. But the reality is, this is in the noise of the data. So please, don't pay attention to all of the internet speculation, the fear mongers that are trying to just use fear to part your money from your wallet without actually delivering any value. And I can get animated, and trust me, I'm not fussing at you. I'm just trying to help you, right? Because I see this all the times. So we just see that there's this big variation, right? I'm reading the comments, trying to answer questions, but at the same time, it's tough to go along and not get caught up in that. Again, the real key here is when you begin to look at the data, right? And the thing is, these are averages, right? So some vehicles, depending upon where you live, how you drive, and what kind of engine you have, 530 might work better for you. But 020 might be better. I mean, this week alone, just doing test samples for customers, I've seen situations where it's both. I've seen where 020 was better than 530 for a customer, but then I've also seen where 530 was better than 020 for another customer. There's a difference if you live in Montana when it's really, really cold versus if you live in South Florida, where it's really, really hot. So these are the things you got to take into mind. Yes, I did. So good. Fun with cars. All right, let's do this real quick. Right. Because you got to make sure that, oh, no, that's not it. Where did he go? Boom. Fun with cars. Boom. There we go. I did. Now, here's the thing. There's a little bit more. I'm going to have to take a quick pause because the guys at Donaldson are trying to log in and they're not seeing the link that I sent. So I better resend them the link real quick. So we'll get back to this in 1 second, but I better send them the link real quick before we mess up. All right, now the link's headed their way. Sorry about that. If anyone ever wanted to know, I'm definitely not a professional YouTuber, right? I make all kinds of ish. So to answer this question, I did, and the next video coming out November 1st is about that, and it'll answer it in a little more detail. But the key thing is there, I didn't change the high temperature, high shear viscosity, the HTHS. That's what the engine actually sees. So I took, okay, what is the factory specified oil for that car? Mobil 1 0W40. Okay, what's the sheared HTHS of that oil, right? So we did that. And then I said, all right, well, now that I know what the sheared HTHS is, because that's what the engine actually sees, now I can compare that to sheared HTS of another oil, which in that case, the driven DI30 had the same sheared HTHS as the Mobil 1 0W40. So I changed because I knew how to make that change. I had that data, right? I don't really recommend just willy-nilly doing that kind of change if you don't really have all the data at your hands to begin with. All right, the guys from Donaldson are starting to show up, so we're going to get them here in just 1 second. But before we do, right, we kind of showed, okay, listen, 0W30 versus 5W20. I'm sorry, I was going to say 0W20 versus 5W30. We're not seeing a big difference. So we can say, hey, that's 100% fake news, right? The stats just don't bear it out when we look at the sample data that we've seen that goes back over 7 years, right? Just not the case. Now, with that being said, what about diesels, right? So we've actually had several samples come in from the 3.0 liter Duramax engine, right? It calls for 0W20 from the factory. Again, you look at the variation in wear metals up here, right? That blue line that's kind of all over the place, that's the samples with less than 10,000 miles. So even if you're changing viscosity under 10,000 miles, the wear metals are just all over the place. It's a mess. But if you look down at that red line at the bottom, now we begin to see that once you get past the break-in period, going from the 20 grade, the 020, to a 30 or a 40. Now, let me be specific here. So these engines call for the Dexos D. So the Mobil 1 0W20 ESP. ESP is the important part here. ESP Mobil 1 020 is Dexos D. The 0W30 Mobil 1 ESP and the 0W40 Mobil 1 ESP have the exact same additive package. So all that ESP family is designed to be our lower ash oils designed for DPF protection. So when you're changing from 020 Mobil 1 ESP all the way up to say 040 Mobil 1 ESP, all you're changing the viscosity. You're not changing the additive chemistry. The other samples that are here are also the 5W30 Pennzoil Ultra Platinum Euro, which also is Dexos D. So those are the only ones that are considered here. So we're still maintaining the same additive package level that's correct for this engine. We're not going and putting Rotella, T6 in there, something like that. No. We're maintaining the correct additive package. But what you can see clearly is the 040 is providing better protection than the 020 in the 3.0 liter Duramax diesel engine. So for all you diesel guys out there, I know you've been hungry for this information. So boom, there you go. You've got it. So it just goes to show, right? In some engines, the heavier viscosity oil is working better. But other engines, not so much. If you're not testing, you're just guessing. So if you want to make the change in viscosity, you really need to do the oil analysis before and after you make the change. But don't do any of that until you get at least 10,000 miles on the vehicle, because otherwise your data is a bunch of mess. Okay? So with all that being said, oh yes, please remember to hit the like button. Absolutely. With with all that being said, let's go bring the guys on from Donaldson because it's now their time. We're going to talk about silicon in the oil, and I've got one plot before we start talking about filters. One thing you can see for certain is that the lower the silicon, the less dust that's in your oil, the least amount of wear you have. So lower dust, lower silicon means lower wear, which means longer engine life. So with that, let's get rid of that presentation and let's bring on Gabe, Matt, John. Man,
hello, everybody.
You're all here, right? And Matt is like, he's got his arm all up. Rotator cuff surgery. He's a trooper, man. He is here for everybody to show up. Let's start talking about. How you guys doing?
Hey, Lake.
Hey, Lake. Thanks for having us.
I'm glad to have you guys. So I know we have a hard end for you guys at 5:30 Central Time. So that is an hour from now. So I don't want to waste any of your precious time because we've got folks here who are in the comments watching. They want answers about filters for all the stuff. And you guys are the pros because I'm the motor oil geek, not the filter geek. So I'm going to let you guys run the show.
Well, I love that people have tuned in to listen to a bunch of geeks because we're the filter geeks.
That's awesome.
All right.
So, do you have your presentation ready to go?
I do, yeah. Do you want me to pull it up?
Drive away then.
All right, let's get this up here. And let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Is this? Oh, that is not. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right, are we seeing it?
We are now.
We are. We're there.
All right, fantastic. So, Lake, the last video was, there were so many great comments. So what we thought we'd do is pulled a few slides together just as some visuals to help with the conversation. But we really wanted to kind of expand on some of the things people were talking about in the comments, some of the things that you and I talked about in that video. What we'll do, keep in mind, we're the diesel engine people, right? So we make filters that protect diesel engines. But what I thought was awesome was so many people in the comments, because you have so many viewers with gas engines, were asking questions about, well, hey, this stuff's cool, but how does it apply to my gas engine as well? So we'll have kind of a focus on diesel engines here, but on these talking points, we'd love to try and tie it to gas engines too and share some of our knowledge and how it might apply there. So, what I brought up here first is, you're wondering, why are we looking at rocks balance in here maybe, but I wanted to kind of...
You would think the filter could stop something that big.
Right,
sure.
Yeah. Hopefully it does, or it's a really bad filter. But the reason I brought this in is because this is kind of a baseline of the whole concept of what we do when we design a filter. It begins with solving a problem. When we design a filter, it's going to go in an application somewhere, and it may be filtering, engine oil or fuel or hydraulic oil. Who knows? It could be anything. But it's to solve a specific problem. And it begins with filter media design, right? So when we design a media, and you and I talked about this in the last video a little bit, we have to find a balance of these things that you see here. So I think this is a nice visual because it helps explain it. But what we want to do, if we want to make a filter the best filter possible, we want to make it highly efficient, but also have a long life. So there's a bit of a balance there, right? If you make a filter too efficient, well, it may have a short life because it may plug up too soon. So if we get our media recipe right for whatever that application is, this is what we're doing in our brains. We're trying to balance that. We're trying to get high efficiency and long life.
Well, it's that trade-off to me is exactly what we see when you're formulating oil. If I want the maximum in terms of fuel efficiency, I'm usually going to pay a price for that in either how long that oil can last or how much deposit that oil builds up. Little nerdy thing here for everybody on the oil side. So there's an additive called GMO, which is glycerol monooleate. It is fantastic at reducing friction. So it's like the easy, cheap way to get fuel economy. But there's actually tests, there are deposit tests that are in the API standards that screen just to make sure you don't put too much GMO in the oil, because GMO is known to create deposits. So it's like, okay, yeah, I can do this, but then my trade-off is going to be that. So there's pretty much, it's always going to be a trade-off. And I feel like in chemistry, it's always that. It's always a balancing act. I'm always saying it's all about balance. It's not about having more of this, or less of that. It's about the balance. And I feel like you guys are showing the same thing right here, right? It's just a different principle.
Right.
They're a different area applying the same principles.
It's physics, right? And you can't dodge it. You can only hope to optimize and create that balance. And that's what Gabe is talking about here. Is typically what Donaldson is looking for is making an understanding that unique application need. Is it a tractor in the field and it's a lot of dust at harvest time, or is it a high performance engine in a mine site? Those are the types of applications we typically are focused on and zeroing in on to deliver the kind of protection, longevity of service, and throughput for that an engine needs from an air filtration perspective, or a lube or fuel tube.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you want to see something really cool, I brought along a picture here for you. Let me, Lake, how do you advance slides? For some reason, this is not going to the next one.
It should be right under the.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So what you're looking at here is under a high power microscope, an SEM, an image of filter media. Specifically, this is air filter media. So if you take that kind of balance that we're looking for and you want to see how this works on a microscopic level, here's what's going on. What we do with some of our premium air filter medias is we design these tiny synthetic nanofibers. And on the right side, you're seeing a little layer of those. You see that layer on top of those fibers, of the big fibers that looks like a little spider web layer, and it's covering all those fibers? That's those nanofibers. What they're doing is trying to do something that's kind of unique in air filtration. And again, we talked about this in that last video just a little bit, but we want to try and capture dust more up on the top layer of the media. We call that surface loading is what we're going for there. And those nanofibers laid out like that help us do that. So on the left side, you're seeing what it looks like after it gets dirty, gets some dust loaded on it.
Right. Yeah.
Once that happens, well, then you get you start to build a higher efficiency. And then
because the dust attracts the dust, it basically starts to kind of be a dust magnet on the top, if you will.
Exactly. Dust magnet. I like that. That's exactly right. If you think about it, I kind of like to draw a similarity to like the lint trap in your dryer. The lint trap in your dryer, it catches lint, and when a little bit of lint builds up on that screen, that attracts other lint, and then it starts to build up, and you actually build efficiency on your lint trap, right? So we actually, if you get an air filter media recipe done right and find that balance, this is what it looks like. So by doing this, you're going to get long life out of this, because you don't pay that penalty like you're talking about. Like there's no free ride, right? There's some kind of penalty you pay. But if you can design your media with a good balance, you don't pay as big a penalty of flow restriction. And that's the key right there, is reducing that flow restriction. John, you
So
have
I know this we're already rolling in the chat, all kinds of great stuff. People want to talk about bypasses. So I know we're going to have to get to bypasses sooner or later. So you're driving the PowerPoint, Gabe. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but just need to know.
Take a second.
You better get there before 6:30 rolls around Eastern time.
All right.
That's
We'll
right.
get the bypass. I promise. Before we move on, though, I want to take this air conversation just a little bit further.
Okay.
Because there's something really important to talk about. And it was big in the comments in the last video. Because if you think about what we're talking about right now, about how once you build a dust layer on that media, your filter becomes more efficient. I want to think about that for a second. If you take that to a logical conclusion, that means that a dirty air filter is actually a good air filter.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to take the conversation this way before we move on to the bypass, because this is something that we really like to educate people about. You should actually let your air filter run its full life. And full life is determined by, well, how much restriction to airflow do you have across it, right? That's the only way to tell when a filter's dirty enough is by something called an indicator. And I know on gas engines, you don't have these typically. It's coming in on like some light duty trucks nowadays, but for the most part, you don't have them on a gas engine. And that's unfortunate. On a diesel engine, you do. All modern diesel engines do. And they look something like this. I brought a little visual here to show you. It's just a little indicator. And what it does is it has a little sliding bar on it. This is just one example of many. They come in different shapes and sizes. But that simple little technology is just measuring vacuum pressure. It's on the downstream side of the filter. So that's the cleaner side. And it's measuring how hard is my engine having to pull air. And that little indicator, when this little guy turns red, and that tells you when to change out your air filter. Now, that's something that is very misunderstood in the industry. So we like to educate people on it because we want them to get the most life out of their air filter. And if they do, they're actually protecting their engine better because it's going to build efficiency, right? So it's going to let less dust through.
Efficiency graph with loading that we showed in that video, I mean, that was worth the price of admission right there.
Mm-hmm.
Just to see that, okay, well, yeah, whatever that target level is that they advertise that, but all the other, that as you feed in dust, it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. That it's not like the filter's getting worse over time. The exact opposite is true. The filter's getting better over time. I mean, that's the mic drop right there, man.
Yep.
And I think something to add to that too, and I saw it come up in the comments a couple times on the video was, well, okay, as that loads, you're sacrificing then the amount of air that comes through. Well, if you're using that restriction indicator, that is set up to the manufacturer spec for what that limit or that lower threshold of air volume that can come through is, and that's when that trips, right? So your initial clean air filter is going to provide way more air than is ever really required through that engine. And as you slowly start to load that over time, that indicator is set to be paired with that system. So it trips at the correct time. So you replace that filter before you get to a standpoint, or before you get to that point where there would be too much restriction for that engine to actually run properly.
That's a great point. These are engineered in. The amount of airflow the engine requires is taking in to account for all that. So that's makes a big thing.
Yeah, I always like to remind people that it's not the filter people that say run it till the indicator turns red. It's the engine manufacturer that says that.
Yeah, and for people that are worried about, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I'm seeing it come up in the chat of when is the right time to change, and our advice as filter manufacturers are follow the instructions of your equipment, right? And each manufacturer, each design for an engine or a vehicle has some guidelines primarily based around that Changing on that indicator value reading is usually the best way to maximize your filter life, and doing that consistently allows you to protect your engine the longest, and minimize the amount of filter changes that are required for your engine to run with protection, and per design.
Yeah, exactly. And what we see so often out in the real world, I'm talking at shops and dealerships, anybody working on diesel engines, we hear a lot that people don't trust the indicator. Here I hold it up again, this little thing here, simple technology. And it's something real common that people say is, well, I've never seen it turn red. We don't use them because we never see them turn red. So we get in some new trucks, and the first thing we do is we go out and we have the techs just pull those indicators and plug that port because we're going to go on a schedule only. That's okay. You can do that. But if you want to get the most life out of the filter, keep that indicator on and use it. And I'll tell you why people don't trust it is 9 times out of 10, it's because they just never ran their air filters long enough. It actually takes a long time. It actually takes quite a while. You can get a lot of miles or a lot of hours out of that filter before they turn red.
Especially if you're on highway. That can go a long ways. And it changes depending on what part of the world you're in. If you're in the Southwest and you get windblown dust, that's going to be much different than if you're driving around, say in the winter and the Midwest, right? That's going to play into it as well.
Yeah. And I saw a funny comment there. Noah ESP said he ran a filter in his truck for 10 years and sold it after 300,000 miles. You probably ran it a little too long.
Well, I think the other thing you can do too, if you're worried about the filter not filtering efficiently anymore, like you've gone to the other side where now it's damaged. If you're doing oil analysis, you're going to see that. Yeah. Right. The used oil analysis is going to show up with the silicon numbers. Right. So if you see your silicon was good and all of a sudden your silicon spikes, then now that the filter media has been damaged and like that. So if you kind of do both, and the restriction question, right? So let's go ahead and deal with that. And this is me. This is the world according to Lake. I'm not speaking on behalf of Donaldson right now. Unless you're running your engine at wide open throttle all the time, the air filter is not the restriction. The throttle blade is. All right, on your gasoline engine guys who are worried about that, your throttle blade and where it is, unless it's wide open throttle, that is not it. Most people are not driving their vehicles at wide open throttle all the time. If you're drag racing, if you're Daytona, Talladega, something like that, okay, different question. But for the average person, daily drivers, you don't need a high performance, high flow air filter. It's not going to help you. More than likely, if it doesn't filter as good, it will hurt your engine's ultimate longevity because, as we showed you on the graph earlier, a higher level of silicon equates to a higher level of wear. The number one most common contaminant that we see in used oil, and remember, I'm looking at hundreds of used oil samples each week. Silicon is number one. So pay attention to this.
Yeah.
This is big. So.
Yeah, that's wise. And I'm seeing a few comments about cleaning air filters, and I saw them on your last video too. I want to talk about that for just a second. I recommend being careful. We don't advise it. You run real risk of damaging that media. In fact, if you look at the chart that's up on the screen for a second, notice you see down on the bottom, each of those colored lines there is a different micron size. What I want you to realize is that you're talking about dust particles far, far, far smaller than anything you can see with the naked eye. And that's what's causing damage, to all those moving parts down in the bottom of the end of the engine. And your air filter is your first line of defense. after the air filter, if you got a turbo, it's going to see the turbo first. Then that dust is going to work its way eventually down the cylinder walls and down into the engine oil, and you get what Lake's talking about. You see it in the oil. But if you're cleaning your filter, you're running a risk because that shop air pressure, even if you turn it down, you're potentially damaging that media. You're talking about these tiny, tiny microscopic sized particles that can get through those little holes that you can't see that you're doing in the media. So we don't advise it. And, most engine manufacturers are going to void the engine warranty if you're running under warranty still. There's some exceptions to that because some of the heavy dust environment places, like some ag and some mining, some of the OEs will say, okay, you can clean an air filter on this engine like 1 or 2 times and then change it out. And that's because farmers at harvest, sometimes they have to clean it out in the middle of the field just to finish the day. Right. So it's rare that an engine manufacturer is okay with you cleaning an air filter. So I just want to point that out, that most of the time you're going to void your engine warranty because they know that it's dangerous too. So be careful with that.
Yeah, I've always been. It's if you look at the cost of engines today and the cost of the vehicle today, your air filter is one of the cheapest things you could put on it, and it's literally one of the most important. So it's just better. And I know people are asking the question in the comments. I'm not going to slam on anybody. I'm not going to do that unless it's cheap, fake AI. Then I will slam all over it, right? But I don't recommend using a reusable, washable air filter. Look, the data right here is all you need to see, right? The best thing you can do is use a good, high quality, high efficiency filter and then run it to its useful life. That's going to give you better protection. You don't need high flow. You need high efficiency. And the longer you run it, the more efficient it becomes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I saw the comment in the chat here, kind of restating what you just said. Lake, is the air filter is cheap insurance, so it's absolutely worth every penny. Worth every penny.
I mean, we said it in the video, and if you guys in the comments haven't watched the previous video that Gabe and I did about air cleaners, I mean, this is a true story, right? We were at Daytona. And we had these literally like gauze-like air cleaners because it would make a little bit more power with that higher flow filter. And it was basically just for qualifying. Being greedy, we decided to put it in the race. And we raced it. And by the end of the race, it looked like someone taking a shotgun and shot the media. It had holes all in it. Mm. And by the time toward the end of the race, the driver's saying, "Man, this thing doesn't go. It won't suck up in the draft. It won't go. It was running good at the beginning of the race." Well, what happened is you're at Daytona. You're down by the beach. There's sand all over that place. Mm-hmm. We sucked in so much sand that it had beaten up the valve seats. So our valve job was gone. And anyone that does airflow knows, like, you want to screw up the flow of your engine, screw up your valve job, right? Yeah. I mean, that's way more power than your air cleaner's ever going to give you is a good valve job. And we destroyed the valve job of the engine. And I was like, okay, learn that lesson right then. And that was 20 years ago. And it's like, all right, don't do that. It's just, we work with a lot of professional race teams. And when we're doing the oil analysis, we are looking for that silicon. And when we see the silicon go up, those dudes are jumping on the filter and they're working on the air box to make sure that it's sealed up, that it's not leaking past the filter, or what do they have to do to the media to get it right? Because they all know that in today's world of today's racing, professional racing, it's about the durability of the power. It's not about making the most power right now. It's about how can I make power over time and maintain that. And proper air filtration is like at the top of the list of things we work on. And it's just, big time. I'll shut up.
No, that's good. And, I'm seeing comments about asking about things like cold air intakes on your daily driver. And we're definitely not saying don't do that. But like you said a minute ago, like there's really no free ride. You're going to have a little bit of a trade-off. So I like to think about it this way. If you're in your daily driver and you want to put a cold air intake and you want to tune that engine and get as much airflow as you can and all that, that's great. But consider something. If you live on a dirt road, or if you drive on a dirt road at all, I would never do that. If you're anywhere near a dusty situation, I would never, ever consider that on my daily driver. But if you're in a pretty good daily environment and it's not dusty, well, you might consider it, but just understand the risk. Those typically are not a high efficiency filter, so you run a little bit of risk. But I also want to tie one thing to a difference between diesel and gas engines. Your gas engine is going to be more tolerant in a lot of ways than a diesel engine. So when we design air filters, we're looking for maximum efficiency all the time because we're protecting diesel engines. So we design our medias for maximum efficiency as much as we can, and still try and get that balance of good flow, right? But your gas engine is going to be more tolerant of a lot of the contamination than a diesel engine is. So there's a little bit of a difference there. I know I'm not giving straight answers, but that's because there's not a straight answer. You got to decide.
Well, I just got to point this out. Since you started talking, Gabe, someone said, hey, this is really valuable. At J Games 1980 said, you know what? Super Sticker, this is valuable. But then Stephen Harris said, no, this is worth even more than that. It's $9.99. Here's $10. Because you guys are you're delivering, you're not asking for nothing. And then T. Dyson 175, $100. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, this community of people is just unreal to show up and people are appreciating the fact that you're just giving them straight truth. You're not sugarcoating it, not marketing anything to them. It's just like, hey, here's what's the best path for your vehicle. So we're coming up on about 30 minutes left, and we've been on air cleaners, air filters. Yep. You know what we got to talk about.
Yeah, we got to get there.
Come on now.
We got to get there. Can I show you something real quick? Here's
yeah. Because somebody asked about pre-filters. Yes, this is great.
Yeah, and there's actually a bunch of questions coming through on pre-filters right now, so this is good timing. What we do in heavy, like medium to heavy dust environments, you're going to see on a modern diesel engine, they're going to have something called a pre-filter on them. That's something we design. Here's one type right here. If you think about it, we're just using physics to separate dust before the dust gets to the filter. And this animation is showing you how this style works. As those red arrows are showing the dirty air and the dust getting pulled in, that air forces this impeller to spin. So it's not motorized. It's just the airflow forces that impeller to spin. It creates a centrifugal force. Those dust particles are heavy, so they move to the outside of it. And then if you watch here, it ejects them out the side in a little ejection port there, right there. And then they go back out into the air. So, that's just using physics in a different way. And it helps make an air filter last longer. So that's where pre-filters come into play. And people are asking about it. Can you put a pre-filter on? Yeah, if you could fit one on, you could put it on. You're adding a little bit of restriction to flow there. So depending on the application, you may shorten the life of the air filter a little bit. I don't know without the application and trying it or running the numbers, but
But maybe the takeaway for that is these pre-cleaners, and there's a lot of different varieties of them that we offer and others do too. These are really for heavy dust environments where you can have large chunks of dust particulate that are, they're not the sub-micron size and kind of in that particle size range that Gabe was sharing in the earlier slide. These knock out the big chunks before you even get that air to the filter media itself and challenging it from the, protecting the filter media itself from a lot of dust challenge that you don't need to, right? These pre-cleaners can do their job.
Yeah. Yeah, and they range from like 85% efficient up to over 90, like up to 95, the really good ones.
Yep.
So they take out a lot of dust.
Yep.
All right, let me skip on ahead here.
They're the big dust, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
All right, here we go.
Here it is.
What everyone's been asking for.
We knew this
months.
was coming, right?
I told you I would get you an answer sooner or later.
That's
It took
right.
me a
That's
while to
right.
get the right guys.
Yeah, so let's talk bypass for a minute. Here's bypass is done in different ways on different engines. It kind of depends on what you have, right? But here's typical. This is like average of what you got. You've got a couple filters on there on a diesel engine now. One of them is going to be running your what we call full flow, and then one of them's going to be running what we call a bypass flow. And simply what that means, I'll skip to the next little schematic here because this shows you what's going on. What that means is that you divert part of the flow through the bypass filter only. So in a normal operation, you're seeing about 10% of flow that's going through the bypass filter itself. And that bypass filter is typically going to have a little bit higher efficiency than the full flow filter. So it's doing like just a fine, we call it polishing of the oil, but it's getting it a little bit cleaner. Then the rest of that flow is going through your full flow filter. Now, you notice above that full flow filter, it says bypass valve. And there's different ways of doing that, but you're also going to have a bypass valve in that circuit. Sometimes it's built into the filter head. Sometimes it's built into the filter itself. But that's extra insurance. As a filter manufacturer, when we make a filter for any circuit, whether it's engine oil like this or hydraulic or fuel or whatever it is, we're adding restriction to flow, like we talked about in the beginning. And there's some situations where too much restriction can be devastating for that circuit, right? You starve a pump, like in a hydraulic circuit, and that's Matt's world here. Matt's our hydraulic guy. He can tell you you'll destroy that. You'll destroy that
Real
pump
fast.
if you starve it. Yep. So we always have to not only just throw a filter in a circuit. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that. We have to design for that, and we work with and in an example like this, we work with the engine OE to figure out what needs to be done in that circuit. So our engineers work with their engineers and decide what that bypass needs to look at. And when it's built into the head, I brought another little visual for you. Let's see if we can get it on camera. I've got a filter head here. If I bring it up here, it's cut away. See this cutaway area?
Here. Nope. I was trying to get you there bigger again.
Oh.
There, we can do that. Here, look at this.
There we go.
There we go. So I'll kind of turn it a little bit so you can see what's going on. This would be the outlet of it. This would be the inlet. And your filter spins on down here. And what's going on is flow would come in, and you see this little red thing here. It's under spring tension. That's your valve. And if anybody knows anything about it's kind of like the way a relief valve works. A relief valve is set by a spring tension. Well, let's see if I can do it with my finger. If I push hard enough on it, can you see how it's opening up there? So if my filter that would be sitting on the bottom here gets totally plugged up, that could be devastating. We're not getting flow where we need to get flow. So now the differential to pressure is high enough, and we create enough pressure on this upstream side that we overcome that spring tension, and then your flow can go around that valve. So it's going to open up and allow flow through.
Yeah. And so those bypass valves are really for if and when your filter reaches its end of life and you're still running your engine, you're not starving the engine for oil or any kind of lubrication. We'd rather pass through unfiltered oil than no oil itself and have a catastrophic failure. that's what those bypass valves are all about. Again, easy to make sure we're delineating the bypass valve against what the bypass filter circuit is in that schematic here too.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. That's
Easy
a
to get
common
them confused,
misconception,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
that they're
Don't conflate.
different, and it's also, I think it's important to show that the bypass filter, that oil is just going back into the sump. The bypass
Correct.
filter oil, it doesn't go back to the engine, just goes right back into the sump. And the reality is, in my experience, is that that's valuable on a diesel engine if you're trying to go with longer oil drain intervals, because that bypass filter is good at removing soot. So it keeps the soot load low. Because in a diesel engine, the primary function, or the primary thing that causes wear in a diesel engine is the soot. That's why diesel oil turns black, is because there's dispersant chemicals in the diesel oil formulation that are designed to keep the soot suspended. Because if the soot isn't suspended finely, it kind of can chunk up together and become those big, like your dust particles, right? On the filter, right? They stick together. Well, when the soot all agglomerates into these big particles, now it generates abrasive wear. In fact, one of the big, really hard diesel engine tests to pass is the bore polishing test. So they preload the oil with soot. They put carbon black as a soot surrogate into the oil so that you're making it harder to begin with already, right? Mr. Dyson, who worked at Cummins, he'll know about that one, right? So the soot is what you're trying to manage. So the bypass filter, when it can lower the level of soot in the oil, that allows for a longer drain interval. If you are just going to change your oil on a fixed short interval, you're wasting your time and money with one of these things. It's not ever going to give you any real benefit.
Yeah, well said. I'm seeing questions about, is it also for cold starts? And Lake's got some videos on that. He's done some work on it, and it's kind of interesting what he's found in his research. But there's going to be times when that might be a factor. Yeah, and Lake, maybe that's a chance for you to kind of talk about your research.
Yeah, so what we found doing engine oil testing on an engine without a bypass. So we removed the bypass valve from the system, and we're just measuring the pressure delta before and after the filter. Right? We can measure pressure upstream and downstream of the filter. What we found is that the flow rate is what actually causes the pressure differential to increase. So even with really, really cold oil, oil that is, at freezing or below freezing temperatures, even though that oil is super thick, the engine speed at startup is fairly low. So the output of the pump is low, but also because the pressure is high in the system, the pressure relief valve in the oil pump is bleeding off oil flow. So it doesn't overpressurize the system. So there's actually less flow going to the media. So there's actually a very low pressure differential when the oil is cold at low RPM. Inversely, when the oil is hot at high RPM, there's a much larger delta. And we got a video coming out in January that will show all of this and really dig into the details. But that, you're here right now, you want an answer, that's the short and sweet of it.
Yeah, pretty interesting. But that is very, very true. A higher flow rate, that creates a bigger differential to pressure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Does that help with bypass? Did we have any other questions on that?
I think we covered that pretty good.
I think so too. Yep.
Someone had asked an interesting question a minute ago. I want to talk about it. It goes back to air filtration for just a second, but I thought it was a great question. They said if I've got a lawnmower with a Donaldson air filter on it, and they're asking about pre-cleaner on that. What's interesting is I don't think they come with a separate pre-cleaner. I may be wrong on that. I'd have to check with our team, but the housings on those, they're designed as a pre-cleaner. We didn't talk about that a minute ago, but if you look at your little housing on that mower, it's round like this, and the air filter sits inside, and the inlet to it is not directly on top, it's off to the side. Well, that creates that centrifugal force, that air to spin around inside the housing, and it forces the dust down to the bottom of the housing. And if you look on the bottom of your Donaldson air cleaner, you're going to see a little black. I actually brought one of these too. I brought a lot of visuals today. A little, what's called a evacuator valve. And that's one of these little things here. Kind of looks like a little duck bill, right? And it's open. See how it's soft and I can squeeze it open? Well, when your engine's running, that closes up because it's under suction, and they're always facing down like this. So on your air cleaner, on your mower, that dust is getting forced down to this little thing, this little valve, and it's closed while the engine's running. And then when you shut down your mower and shut down the engine, it opens up. It just relaxes. Because see, when I'm not holding it open, how it's kind of hard to see, I guess, on camera.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can see it. Yeah.
You can see that,
You can see it. Mm-hmm.
So you actually do have a pre-cleaner built into the housing of that. So this, though, keep an eye on it. That's a service item, okay? You can run it for quite a while. I don't know how long yours is going to last, but they dry rot eventually, and they have to be able to be soft and close up. So you're going to want to change that out when it starts to feel like it's getting hard, or if it's got any cracks in it or anything, because it has to be able to close up. Otherwise, you're going to decrease the life of your air filter. So I hope that helps. That was a great question.
That's really good.
Question I saw here, and I saw it come up a couple times, about whether or not, here it is, why not just run the largest filter that you can put in the space available? And I think that really applies to probably both air and liquid filtration. Surface area is king, essentially, when it comes to restriction. So if you're trying to get longevity out of something, how much dirt you can pack into it before you hit the max restriction for whatever that application is, surface area is king. So there's really not necessarily any harm by going to a physically longer or bigger footprint for filter media. Just note that, especially in liquid applications, so if we're in like an engine oil or crankcase applications, you need to make sure that you size for the additional space, and you need to add more liquid for that. So if you went from, say, a 3-inch filter to a 10-inch filter, you got to add that much more liquid to that circuit to compensate for that. But otherwise, yeah, it's a really good lever to be able to pull to add more longevity to something, to be able to have either less frequent replacements or whatever you're looking for. But yeah, there's not really a downside on that.
Oil volume is your friend.
Yep.
Oil life is usually down to the oil to fuel ratio. The more oil you can put in your engine without the NTI hitting the crankshaft is usually a good thing.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that's getting to be more popular in the aftermarket world, isn't it, Lake? On a lot of engines, yeah.
Oh yeah, there's people who are coming up with different oil pans that have extended oil capacity, and then the replacement filter replacement. They move the filter remotely so you can put a bigger filter in it, and all those kind of things. Those are all good. I know one of the questions. Somebody asked a question about centrifugal bypass filters. I'm aware that they exist, but I have no personal experience with that, so I'm not going to touch that because that's not something that I had any.
Yeah, I don't think that's something we've encountered at Donaldson either.
Yeah, they're out there.
Yeah.
People experiment with different technologies, which is great. I mean, that's how you come up with new stuff. I think it's something that I know we've looked at it in the past. I don't know if it's a technology that works well enough to really explore. I think is
It
kind
comes
of deal on that.
From when I've dug into it a bit, it comes down to kind of bang for buck. In order to do centrifugal oil filtration,
Yeah.
you need some pretty serious equipment in order to make that work correctly. I've seen them where they try to force flow to go through a certain way and make that work in liquid in a small package, but it's not very efficient. And at the end of the day, your money typically is better spent on a regular filter at that point in time than that. I see that a lot in really heavy duty industrial applications. Marine comes to mind, like tugboats and stuff like that. They do employ centrifugal, but they're offshore for months, right? And they've got a crankcase that is, you know, probably 40 barrels of oil, right? And so that makes sense. Most of us aren't driving around something with 40 barrels of oil in the crankcase, right? And so it doesn't make sense to really deploy those types of technologies to it, nor is there typically the space for it.
Yeah.
All right, so we got about 15 minutes left. You guys want to jump into fuel filters?
Yeah.
'Cause I know there's something that is important there. We obviously, Matt, you and I did the video before about fuel filters, and that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Especially we have a global audience here, so that's one thing to keep in mind is we're not talking just about North American specs here. That we got people from literally Australia, Europe, Russia, all around the world watching right now.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see what we have next on the slides. Oh, perfect. I wasn't sure what was next. Yeah, this is. Yeah, here's a good visual to kind of kick that off. What you're looking at here is the actual, I guess you could call it particle size range. These are the sizes of particles that wear out modern high pressure common rail diesel injectors. Those particles are so small now that they're down to bacteria size. So between bacteria and red blood cell in size is that's the size of dirt that we worry about now, which is just mind-boggling, right? Because you keep in mind, you can't see smaller than 40 micron. That's what most of us can see. That's like a tiny little dust particle floating in the air. It's about 40 micron in size. So you're talking about this microscopic size stuff. If I go in the Wayback Machine, I was a mechanic working on off-road diesel engines. And on those older engines, the way we determine clean fuel, and guys like Lake here's probably done this a million times. You sample fuel, you put it in a mason jar, and you hold it up and look at it, and you're looking for like big black chunks, right? And you go, oh yeah, that's either clean or not clean. There you go. There you go, Matt. But I can't do that now because I can't see bacteria size particles, right? And the reason for this, it's because engines have changed so much. And we'll tie it to autos here in a second because I like to tie stuff to cars for you guys. But with a diesel engine, these injectors now, they're running up to 40,000 PSI. That's to get a better combustion process. When a diesel engine goes down the road these days, it's a lot cleaner than it was 20 years ago. And that's one of the big reasons. They get a better combustion process. They also have exhaust aftermarket treatment systems on them, which are, I know, controversial because they're a pain, but they do clean the air. They work good. But with the injectors, that's why you've got such high pressure and such tight clearances inside those injectors. So 40,000 PSI in a tiny little space where a needle's moving real fast to give you your fuel metering. That's why clean fuel is needed. Cars, much more tolerant. Your gas engine's a lot more tolerant. You don't have to worry about having such clean fuel. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes in for folks. We were talking about this the other day, the differences in cars kind of behind the scenes, and Matt and I were chatting about it. And, I've got a gas engine that's a sports car, and it's a highly tuned engine. And the pressures on mine are just under 3,000 PSI at the injector, which is really high for a car, but that's nothing compared to 40,000 PSI. So that's a big difference between gas and diesel injectors.
And a little Matt, bit to compare that too is like, so he said about, I think he said 3,000 PSI. I've done some research. I think the highest injection pressure on a production car today for gasoline is up to 5,000. So somewhere in that 3,000 to 5,000 range is kind of the upper echelon for gasoline today. If you think about kind of comparing that to diesel, that's roughly what the injection pressures were for diesel back in the 80s-ish time frame, right? And so how far we've moved, and gasoline has changed as well, right? We've moved our injectors from being in a throttle body to the manifold to now direct injected, where they're actually in the head themselves. And yes, we've moved a long way in gasoline as well, but we're still not at that level of atomization in a gasoline engine that's required in order to meet emission standards. So it's not quite there yet. So it's not as tolerant. Gasoline, there's also some other things during the refinery process. It actually comes out cleaner, just straight out the refinery. It's at the top of, essentially, if you kind of look up the different steps, you've got kind of bunker and crude oil. You'll get diesel, you get kerosene, and then naphtha and gasoline up towards the top. Those fuels are thinner. You get particulate dropout much quicker. Gravity's on your side. So, I mean, realistically, even if, you know, go fuel up from a normal filling station, gravity works really well to pull a lot of that particulate out. And you're not as susceptible. You don't have nearly the same type tolerance as in a gasoline engine. So you don't necessarily have to protect it to that same level. Is there any harm in doing so? I get lots of questions a lot of time. Well, hey, I've got a diesel tank and a gasoline tank. You know, if I'm doing this to the diesel, why don't I just do it to the gasoline? Absolutely. There's no harm in cleaning it further. It's just you're not really going to get the, you know, benefits out of what you put into it by cleaning it further than really where it needs to be for that application. But yeah, no harm can actually be done by employing the same filtration premises on gasoline.
Well, I think one of the interesting things to me about this slide is that you are actually using bacteria as a reference point. And what people may not realize is that there is bacteria in many fuel tanks.
Yeah.
If you've had the experience of going to a pump and you pull the handle and it's just painfully slow dispensing the fuel, a lot of times that's actually from bioaccumulation within the tank or within the lines of the tank.
Yeah, it definitely can be, and I think that's a great lead into a couple questions I just see about. I've seen about, hey, how good is fuel at the pump and different things like that. So yes, definitely within biodiesel, you can get bio growth that's inside of there. That can really only be present if there's moisture within that system as well, right? So those microbes need the water to feed on the fuel to screw everything up. So if you actually can get that fuel dry and eliminate water from your system, essentially that can't happen, right? So that'll be a barrier for any of that to occur. So that's really good. I think the other question was, you know, how good is the fuel? Well, I guess I can speak to it from a particulate standpoint. Fuel chemistries vary all over the place across the country and across the world. But from a cleanliness standpoint, if we're talking about gasoline, most states adhere to a 10 micron, 50% efficient filter. So essentially, no matter what's in that tank that's underground at the filling station, when you open up that handle, there's a filter underneath that cabinet that is 10 micron, 50%. So essentially everything that's 10 micron and larger, it'll capture half of that. That's what's getting put into your gasoline engine. Oddly enough, for diesel, you would think, okay, we just showed you and told you that, hey, you got tighter restrictions, you have more sensitive components. Oddly enough, the typical standard for diesel is 30 micron, 50%. So it's a more open filter at a 50% efficient filter for a system which is much less tolerant to contaminant. And those are people in the high towers that make those decisions, and logic doesn't seem to come into play.
30 years ago, right, Matt? Before high pressure common rail.
And that's, you make a really good point. There's a lot of things that are still within the industry today that are based off of, hey, this made sense 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and we just continue to go along with it.
I see it every day.
One of my favorite things to tell people is Diesel engines have changed so dramatically, and so has gasoline, but changed so dramatically in the last 20 years that you'd think we'd change the fuel standards along with it. But the same allowable amount of dirt and water content within fuel today is the same as it's been since the mid 70s, which is roughly about, what is it? I think a little over 1,000 times dirtier. The allowances today is over 1,000 times dirtier than what you need to have by the time you hit the injector. And that's just such a far wide range. It always blows my mind to just kind of think about that. Like, wow, we've come a long way, and yet we haven't done a whole lot about it.
And that's for the fuel spec here in the U.S., right?
Yeah, for the fuel spec here in the U.S. And realistically, most of our fuel specs today, as it sits today, in the last 15 years, things have kind of moved around and changed. But they're very similar. When it comes to dirt, they're very similar with what you see in Europe, what you see in Australia, what you see in a little bit in South America. You see different chemistries across the world, different ppm of sulfur, different octane ratings, things like that. But dirt almost globally is at that same kind of level. Yeah.
Because I know one of the questions in the chat was about the chemistry of fuels being different around the world, and that's 100% fact. Like somebody asked, is that truth or myth? And like,
yeah, there's different levels and different things, and it gets a little confusing to read because some of it they're testing it this way but get the same outcomes, and you're testing it here a different way but you're getting very similar outcomes. But a lot of it from a chemistry standpoint can change and fluctuate a little bit. Probably the biggest change has been sulfur in the last 15 years. Right. Some parts of the world are still 5,000 ppm sulfur fuel or higher, right? More developed areas have gotten to 150 and down to 15 and kind of coming along. But yeah, like I think I saw somebody in the chat, European fuel is better, and that perception is typically because the octane ratings are higher with European fuels. Octane
on the gasoline
and
side,
cetane.
but also they have premium diesel as well.
Yes, right. So yeah, that exists there. I think it comes down a little bit more towards where their environmental ceilings, I guess, if you want to call it, are. And so, all right, this is where we want to hit. So they've created tighter fuel levels of where they need to be. Whereas in North America, it's kind of dragging behind there a little bit. But it seems like every time we decide that in North America we want to increase something, we kind of copy what Europe has done and paste it into our standards and just kind of copy and paste. So we usually drag behind 5 to 8 years, it kind of seems like, every time that there's kind of a new fuel standard.
There's one thing in the U.S. on the gasoline side, just from the chemistry side, there are at least 20 different specifications of gasoline, depending upon where you are in the country. Los Angeles, the South Coast area, LA, San Diego, that fuel is chemically different than, say, the fuel in Dallas, Texas, versus the fuel in Miami, Florida, versus the fuel in Detroit, versus the fuel in, say, Seattle, Washington. Those different areas, they change the chemistry based on not just the environment, but also other factors. So there's like boutique blends all around the country, which makes it kind of tough to compare what someone sees in East Coast versus West Coast, because the fuel's actually different.
Yeah, diesel's the same, and the big variance. There's an additive variance in them, but bio content is a big one for diesel. Yeah, and some areas have no bio mandate. Yeah, and then some areas have a high.
Yeah.
You drive to Illinois and Iowa, you're going to get a higher bio content.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's a big problem when you get, especially in the winter months, you get somebody that fills up with a high bio content, say in Missouri, and drives to, North Dakota, and that fuel doesn't work there, right? And there's a lot of variables out there across the interstates that can get you in real trouble if you're not paying attention to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I know we're getting close to your hard cutoff, and I don't want to keep you guys too late and get you in trouble for holding you at work too late today.
Thank you.
So, any last thoughts, parting comments for the crowd? Because this is an awesome. Again, the Motorola Geek community. You folks are awesome. I love you guys. Y'all showed up in force tonight. Help out my buddies from Donaldson, who are great guys, right? We need them back again. These guys are awesome. They're just like
I'd love to.
Right? So,
Absolutely.
any last comments, questions, concerns before we let you go?
Well, somebody wants to know if Matt has moonshine in the jar.
I just read that. This is ice water.
It's Friday. It's Friday afternoon.
Yeah, it is Friday.
Right?
No, I think we covered some good stuff, Lake. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate the discussion. Hopefully we gave
100%.
people some good takeaways, and hopefully we applied some of our diesel nerdiness to gas engines too. Love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will. Awesome.
All right.
Well, you guys, I'm going to let y'all go, and then I'm going to say goodbye to the guys here before I wrap up. But again, Matt, John, Gabe, everybody at Donaldson, thank you so much. For everybody watching, if you want more, I posted this earlier. I'm going to post it again. The Donaldson folks have a page that you can go to where you can connect and get more questions asked and answered, right? Nathan volunteered y'all for that, by the way.
That's great.
So if anybody's got more questions, you want to hit them up, here's the way to do it. Again, thank y'all so much for showing up, watching. Appreciate it. And November 1st, next video coming out. You guys check it out. Otherwise, have a great weekend. And thank you. Good night. See ya.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, Lake.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Stream.